but I don't, we just, Warren Taylor.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Fayette County School Board of Trustees monthly business meeting. It is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want our patrons to know that we have 2 short meetings before our regular monthly meeting, and so we appreciate your patience just as we move through some reorganization for the start of the year. And I do want to welcome, we have 3 new board members here, Erica Back, Sasha Henderson, and Dustin Munson. First meeting, we're super excited to have them on the board.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Welcome, you guys.
So the first meeting is the election of school board officers, and I suppose I need to ask first if there is we're going to open nominations first, and we can nominate via either a slate or we can nominate individual officers. And I wanted to ask first if anybody wanted to put forth a slate to nominate. Seeing none, we will move to nominations per office. After we do the nomination for president, whoever's elected will come to this seat. And for the subsequent positions, we'll just keep our places for tonight, just a lot of up and down when you do each position. And also, we're not doing assistant secretary, even though it's on the
Correct. That's not
docket.
the position we filled in the past. So
Right,
yes.
right, and we are going to change that in our policy. So I would, yeah, that's all right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Leslie, were we supposed to have a motion to approve the?
We are supposed to have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted and submitted. I didn't realize we had to do that before the main meeting, so I would like to request a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam President, I will make that motion.
Thank you, Chris. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ann has a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Ann. Thank
Yes.
you.
Good sight. Good
Just
vision there.
make sure we're all.
Yes. Okay, now I'd like to open up the floor for nominations for president. Are there any nominations? The floor.
For President, I nominate Ryan.
Okay, that's great. Any other nominations for president? Okay, we will now close the nomination for president. I'd like to seek a motion to close the nomination for president.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Chris. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ann. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. Nomination of president is over. Now we take a vote on president. Is that correct?
Yep.
These are procedures we do once a year, and we've never done it, we haven't done it in a long time by position, so bear with us as we try to move through this. Okay, I would like, since there's no other nominations on the floor, all those in favor of Ryan as president, please raise your hand. Pose same sign. Okay, we had 6.
And he abstained, correct?
Abstain. So, congratulations, Ryan. You are president. So we will, I need a motion, no, we already voted, so we're done with that. So now, you and I will switch, and you get to run the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Leslie.
And you think if she does it once a year and messes it up? I don't do it once a year.
You want your name tag, Leslie?
Oh, I can be Ryan.
I do want to publicly say thank you, Leslie, for your work as the president of the board.
Absolutely.
It's a tough job. For those that are interested, the board president essentially is my main point of contact, right, for any board issues. We talk essentially almost daily in some form, whether that be via text or phone call. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for your support in the first 6 months that I've been the superintendent here. So just want to extend that thank you to you publicly.
Thank you.
And obviously still part of the board and still a big part of what we do. It takes 7 people, right? Not just one. But I just want to thank you for your leadership. So.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And welcome, Ryan. Welcome.
Appreciate it.
Glad to have you in the seat, so
Well, we'll see. If you are or not.
you'll be awesome.
You'll be fine, you'll be fine.
All right, so I guess we need to move on to
Yep, just nominations for vice president.
any nominations for vice president.
I would like to nominate Sasha for vice president.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none. So I would like to seek a motion to close the nominations for vice president.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
So we'll go ahead and take a motion for,
No, we have
to
to
approve
vote.
Sasha as.
You have to vote on the motion.
Oh, we didn't vote on the motion, sorry, I apologize.
See?
Yep, I missed it.
We're all there.
Robert's Rules of Order.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
Not easy.
Again, when it's done so seldom, this particular thing, it's a little different. So I'd like to seek a motion to close the nominations for.
We just did that, so now we're voting.
Oh, I'm
All
sorry.
those in favor to close those nominations?
I'm glad you're in that seat.
Yes.
We'll get it, it's all right.
Just take
So,
It does.
all in favor of closing the nominations for the vice president? Those against? Seeing none. So now I need a motion,
Now we vote.
To approve Sasha as vice president.
right.
I'll make that motion.
She makes a motion to approve Sasha as vice president. Do I have a second? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Dustin.
Dustin?
Yes. Sorry.
No, it's great.
That's okay.
All of those, so now.
All in favor? Yeah, absolutely.
Now we vote.
And now we vote. All in favor of Sasha for vice president? Those opposed? All right. So congratulations. And now we move on to secretary. I'd like to seek a motion for a nominate, or I mean, I'd like any nominations for secretary. I would like to nominate Leslie. Are there any other nominations? Okay, so now we
That's correct. The motion to
close.
close those nominations, yeah.
I need a motion to close the nominations for secretary. Sasha, and a second?
I'll second.
Erica. All right, so
Vote.
all those in favor? Opposed?
Vote on the secretary, Leslie as secretary.
And now,
Motion.
like a motion,
We already did that.
yeah, we don't need a motion.
Yeah.
We already voted.
Yeah, we
We
already,
already did that.
So now you're
I think I
closing
we're
this.
closing, yeah.
Close it.
Okay.
Just close it, or do we?
You probably have to seek a motion. to-
Right. I'd like to seek a motion to close the meeting of the election of officers. Erica, and do I have a second?
I will
Chris.
second.
Yes,
It's the
sir.
same man in prison.
All right,
You could, but.
so that
You can
meeting is
say
closed.
We don't vote. You do.
I'm sorry?
When you adjourn, you vote.
That's Chris's job. He makes the motions to adjourn.
He
Okay, so
I'll
I-
make a motion to adjourn. Yes.
And a
Erica
second.
made the motion.
I'll second it.
And,
Leslie,
okay.
all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, now we are adjourned.
You're doing them a
You're doing great. You're
job.
doing great.
Yeah.
Good job.
Hey, Ryan.
Good job, process.
So proud of myself.
For
I'm
So
anybody.
now
very
we've got
proud
the
of
Board of
it.
Finance meeting, so,
Right,
yeah.
so now we call to order the Board of Finance meeting. And first, we need the election of the president and the secretary. So do I have any motions for president?
Well, I would like to nominate a slate for the
Okay.
finance board, and I would like to nominate Erica as president and Chris as secretary.
Awesome.
Are there any other nominations?
Oh, no, I'll second it, that's what we did.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. So I would like a motion to close the nominations.
I so move.
Ann? And a second? So those nominations are closed.
And take a vote on that.
So we need to now take a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Passes 7-0.
Investment review.
Yep, we're going to turn things over to Mr. Harris.
We need
for-
to, the motion to end the finance board, right?
This is.
This
we're
is
still
part
in
of
the
the
finance
Oh,
meeting. Yeah,
oh,
we've got
good,
more
good.
items.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're not there yet, according to
Not
this.
quite.
Good, good.
We're going to let Mr. Harris, we're going to turn things over to him to go
We only do
through.
this once a year.
It can be confusing. We're going to go through investment policy here, investment review of our corporation investments, as well as some information about the financial state of the corporation. So Mr. Harris will do all three of those for us. So
All right.
you're off the hook for a second.
I'm kind of enjoying sitting here. If you'd like to continue on, I'll
It's all you. You're on.
I think you should have materials in your packet. I'll get you a presentation eventually of the reviewing the conditions of the school district. But first, you have a packet there that shows, it's titled Corporation Interest Received During 2024. I'm going to give a little bit of a review, and I'm probably going to say some things. I'm specifically speaking to the new board members from the standpoint, you're going to feel like you're drinking out of the fire hose. So if I go too fast, or if you have questions on anything, do not hesitate to stop me and say, what'd you say? And hopefully I'll be able to explain it. But the first thing, corporation interest received, this is something that, this is my 5th year in the district. This has dramatically changed over the 4 years that I've already served as the district director of operations. The total interest received in 2024 is $1,407,428.48. I'll use round numbers from here, but to give you an idea, last year in 2023, it was $476,000. The year before that, it was $72,000, and the year before that was $152,000. Now, there's a few reasons why it's so much higher. One reason is that the interest rates, we were going from, and I'll talk about all of the CDs and those kind of things that we have, but we were going from interest rates of 0.04% to most of our interest now is, most of it's over 5%. They started to drop back at the end of the year, and so we've lost out. So that's one factor is when you realize it, the interest rates have went up 10 times from 0.4 to over 4%. The other factor on it is that a year ago in December is when we actually received money for the building projects at Frazee Elementary and at the high school pool. So we've had $12 million sitting in the bank that we couldn't spend until the projects got going. So while that money was sitting in the bank, we have had it in interest-bearing accounts. So when you throw in the fact that we have usually about $9 million sitting there, well, for the last year we had $12 million sitting there. The good news is we're going to be able to take that, and some places where we fell a little bit short in the projects, that interest money will roll right into the projects to give us additional funds. So when you really look at it, like I said, our interest is about triple what it was even a year ago. Some of the other things in on there as far as the interest, our main bank for doing our banking here in town is First Financial Bank. We have, as of December the 31st, we have a checking account balance of $19,500,000. We have a money market with the Go bonds of $7.3 million. Payroll clearing account, it just sits there at $1. And then we have another clearing with credit cards that had a balance of $7,800. So those were the account balances as of December the 31st. Then I want to go down to the bottom of the page, shows all of the CDs that we have, and to give you a little bit of an explanation of those. Really, I inherited kind of the $9 million, a little over $9 million now. But we have CDs out there. We have 6 of them, I believe, 2, 4, 6. And the 6 accounts, they all have different maturities. Generally speaking, we have looked at somewhere between 9 months to 18 months. That seems to be the sweet spot. There's a financial services company we work with. You'll get to meet them along the way, called Baker Tilly. Anytime one of these bonds comes due, such as the next one is in March, if you go to the bottom page, we have one at Union Savings and Loan Bank at 5.25% that matures on March the 8th of 2025. When that matures, Baker Tilly will say, we have $1.5 million and send this out to usually somewhere between 5 and 10 financial institutions around the state that qualify to meet, and we'll talk about the criteria in a little bit, but they will send that out and say, Fayette County School Corporation has this much money to place into it, what would you like to bid? And so then they bid that, usually we ask for a range. They will tell us that, well, we will give you 12 months at 4.83%. I'm totally making up numbers now. But we will give you 24 months at 4.79%. The longer range right now is lower. At one time it was going the other direction. But when they give us that and give me the list, I talk it through with Baker Tilly, and then we take what we believe is the best interest in the school district. Sometimes if they're only off by 2 or 3 tenths, but the longer one is a little bit lower, I'd rather lock in for that additional year. If there's a big difference in the shorter term, it's like, okay, let's go with the shorter term and take the higher rate. I know a year ago, a year and a half ago now, we actually did something that was unheard of to me, even if it was my idea, but we had one of those 0.4 interest rate CDs that wasn't going to come to for about 6 months, and that's when the interest rates, I say, skyrocketed. They went up to above 5%. And we actually said, we want to close that out. We were penalized by it, but the penalty was literally, we lost about $900 by getting rid of that early, but we gained $10,000 by rolling it into the new one. So we're always looking at those to lock in what we can do best for the school district. And I think in the last 2 years, I really think we've got it a lot better, a lot more right than we've gotten it wrong. But Baker Tilly is an excellent partner to work with us on that. So that's kind of the banks that we work with. And you notice that Union Savings and Loan Bank is on there 3 different times locally. The First Financial one's on there 1 time. BMO Harris and Merchants Bank are also on there. The Union Savings and Loan, First Financial here locally. We have a branch for Merchants here also locally. So we try, and we've done that a couple times, that the local bank may be a couple of tenths of a %, a little bit lower interest rates, but we've kept the money local. But they also understand sometimes it makes a big difference, and so we try to do all that. So I don't know if there's any questions on the review of the financial institutions.
Well done, Mr. Harris.
Okay. Next one. Review of the overall investment policy of the political subdivision. This is one that's in the evolution process with everything else that you're doing as board policy. Currently, we have board policy 7.04. It's our investment policy, Fayette County School Corporation. I'm going to review that, and that's where it is at the moment. But I think even in the first reading and those kind of things, you're going to have a new financial policy, so it's going to change the language a little bit if you approve those changes. But essentially what it says with our financial policy, I'll summarize, and that is the general objective is the safety of the money. I can't all of a sudden get a hot tip on Bitcoin and say, hey, let's take $3 million school district and invest in Bitcoin. I've heard it's going to go skyrocketing. The state law really limits what you can do as far as the safety, the maturity, the rating of the financial institutions. All of those are governed by state law. So while somebody could say, hey, I heard the stock market went up by 20%, that really doesn't affect us. It has to be safe funds that we can access if we need to. It's something we know we're not going to lose the taxpayers' money on. So it needs to have safety, it needs to have liquidity, and it needs to have the return on investment. So we look at all of those as following the board policy on those kind of things. So that's what the current board policy is. And really, if you look at the new policy, it probably just says the same thing in a lot less words for whatever the reason. So that's what we follow as our guideline as we go through looking how we invest.
So Randy, will this policy be adjusted by CCH, or is this, it will be? I'm looking now at Jeremy, but I was.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, so we'll bring you a new policy that essentially is our investment policy.
Yep.
That will be very similar, but we'll have some different verbiage. I mean, obviously, the boundaries that we work within will be the same. That doesn't change. But it will be worded a little differently. And Randy's first review basically said that, well, I like this policy better, the new one. Yeah, we'll have that for you.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, now we'll move to the monitors and the screens, I think. And we've got the fourth thing that we're required to do in our Board of Finance meeting is to review the financial condition of the school corporation. The charts and those kind of things that you're going to see before I get into them, these are provided by what's called the DUAB Board, which is the division of, take a blank, Distressed Unit Appeal Board. That's what it is. Which is kind of interesting, but there is a board out there that if school districts get into financial trouble, they have to go before the DUAB Board and determine whether they can continue on their own or whether they put somebody else in charge of the finances and things. So all of the charts come from the DUAB Board, and realize because these are coming from a state site, other than the first slide that I'm going to show you, when it's showing you the yearly balance and things, they're all back to December of 2023. So don't think, oh, it's really not exactly where we are today. It's where we were then. The first one, the chart shows the ADM, which stands for Average Daily Membership. This is one that I hope that eventually I'm not going to have to show this chart the way that it is, but literally for the last 20 years or longer, the school district has lost students. So these are the students that attend our schools, and the decline continues on. Honestly, I think we're getting closer to the bottom, but we're not there yet. So, and realize that with the ADM, that affects the dollars we get from the state of Indiana. The more students we have, the more dollars. The less students, the less dollars. So it drives it significantly. This one's a little bit hard to read and even harder to understand in some respects, but it's the fund balances by type. The two largest ones, the two tallest lines, I'll call it, the yellow line is the balance of our operations fund, and the one that looks a little bit more orangish on there is the balance of our education fund. Those are the two main funds in the school district. Education fund pays for, think of it as everything in the classroom. It's paying for the teachers, it's paying for the principals, it's paying for school supplies. Mainly it's the employees. And when I say in the classroom, I mean in the classroom. The education fund does not pay for anything in central office, superintendent, school board, director of operations. All of those come out of the operations fund. They do not come out of the education fund. So it's directly classroom related. You can see our cash balance on education fund has increased. Just so that, again, for the new board members, my goal in the next year is that it is going to decrease. I think that the balance is getting too large. And in fact, if you looked at the 2023 balance, and you'll see that in my fund report later on, the 2024 balance is lower than what it was in 23. So we've already started the turn to start getting that balance lower. As a taxing organization, our job is not to make money. Our job is to best utilize the funds that the taxpayers in Indiana and the taxpayers in Fayette County have combined to provide us for educating our students. So doing a huge cash balance doesn't serve any purpose to the kids. So we've already turned the corner on that one. The operations fund has also increased over the years, and we're also turning the corner on that one to begin lowering that one. But I'll talk about some other things at the end of my presentation here and some of the financial challenges ahead that it's kind of been intentional to increase that a little bit because there's some big needs out there that we'll do.
Randy, can you explain why it's important to lower those?
I will tell you, from my early days of being a superintendent, my early days being 16 years ago now, we always wanted a cash balance of 20%. That allowed you cash flow to pay bills because you get some bills early, get some bills late. The checks from the state may not get here on time. That was an issue back then. But my goal was to keep it somewhere around a cash balance of about 20%. Our cash balance now is somewhere around the 50 to 60% range. That's too high and it needs to be brought down. So you want enough to, no different than your checking account. You don't want your checking account at home to be exactly what the bills come in. You want to have a little bit more there as the ebbs and flows of the year go along. And we want to be able to handle the ebbs and flows and ups and downs. We don't want to be able to just stash more money.
But we
in the bank.
can't take that money, I mean, we can move stuff from the 15%, up to 15% from the education fund to operations. But we can't move, can we, I should ask it as a question, because I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. We can't move money out of operations into other funds? Like, can we can move to rainy day.
We could move money from operations or education into rainy day.
But that's it, not,
We can't move it to the special ed fund or
right,
something like that.
or debt service, or,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And understand too, school finance is so different than other finance and other places. Like, so you essentially have your cash balance, which is what Randy's speaking to, right? Then you have your approved budget, which is what you're allowed to spend. Just because you have it doesn't mean you can spend it. Does that make sense? And so that's where it gets to be really confusing for people. But Randy's right. I mean, it's 50-60% of your annual budget in the bank. We're not a bank, but so it's this fine balance of like being fiscally responsible, right? Because we want to be a corporation, we're declining enrollment, cost of goods and services are going up, but also not being a repository, if you will, like a bank for money. So, but to the credit of the corporation, the leaders in the corporation, such as Mr. Harris, Mr. Collins, like the corporation's in a very good financial standing in terms of cash, right? So, sorry.
Thanks, Randy.
The next one, the slide shows the annual deficit or surplus. This just shows the funds in general. So you can see that the green is revenue, the blue or purple there is expenditures. So the last few years, the green has been larger. That's where we've increased the balances. If you go back to 2018, I think was the last time that we saw a difference, but we will see that next year. When we look back in 2024, we have went a little bit into the education fund. So we don't want to create a spiral that makes it worse, but as I said, our cash balance right now is higher than it needs to be. And then the next one really just brings that into perspective. It shows that the total of all of our funds is 64.8% at the end of 2023.
But it looks like historically, since 2014, we've, except for 2019, we've maintained a balance in the 50% range or
Yes.
higher.
And I would say it needs to be lower than that, but it will not be lower than that if I have anything to say about it in 1 year, because if you drop a chunk in 1 year, all of a sudden you've created how you're going to stop the fall. So that's where you gradually go into it, and that's what we're working on. The next chart, this was kind of interesting and it's a little hard to explain, but this is where we get all of our funds from. The blue, the large one in the middle, that is from state tax dollars, the state revenues. That's what comes based on our ADM. So we get about $7,800 per student as a ballpark, and that's the major portion. The state revenue is made up of income tax, sales tax, gambling tax. There's 4 or 5 other ones, but those are all of the biggies there. If you look at the very bottom of that, the local tax revenue, that's coming from the local property tax. Mainly it's paying our debt service. And also some of it does go into operations, but that's a much more stable, excuse me. And the board has worked on keeping our local income tax a flat tax rate. This year we actually dropped off, we'll get to that some other time. But that's the local dollar. So those are the main things. The one I really want you to notice at the very top one that kind of comes in there in actually about 2020, and it gets bigger and it goes up. That was the federal ESSER dollars. Next year I would expect that, whatever color that is, purple, chartreuse, whatever, I don't even know. But that line will get a little bit wider next year, and then it stops. I mean, December 15th, we made our last payment out of ESSER dollars. So in 2 years from now, that line will not exist anymore, except in the old history of all of the school districts. So that one has been a huge, that's one of the reasons why we've been able to increase both our education operations fund, is some of the things that would have been paid out of those funds, we paid for out of the ESSER dollars. So altogether, over the 5-year period here, we received about $9 million in ESSER dollars.
And the ESSER dollars were from the pandemic and the government.
That all started with the
Stimulus.
pandemic in 2020, with the CARE, they called it CARES at first, and then it evolved into another round of grants, ESSER 2, and then it revolved in the biggest and largest one of ESSER 3 was the final round of money. So that line will eventually drop off, as it's really already dropped off of our budget as it is now. Next slide, this really just shows what I already talked about, and the other one is just part of the presentation. Also, the next couple of slides show that. So there's the interest that we received in 2024 as well as back to 2023. These are the banks that I already talked about, so it's on 2 different places just because of the way the finance report runs. And then the fund balances, these are the main funds that we have in the school district. The education fund, you can see, as I told you, it's dropped a little bit. It's dropped about $500,000 from December of 23 to December of 24. The debt service, that looks higher now in 2024, but we're not going to be collecting as much as many local property taxes in 2025, so that will drop back. And that is probably if there's any fund that's, I'll call it the sacrosanct fund of all funds, Indiana from the top down is worried about our rating as far as borrowing abilities, and every other fund would go to 0 before the state really would let you default on a debt. So that's where almost all of the funding starts with, from the local property tax dollar. First, we're going to fund your debt, and then if you got any money left over, then we'll fund roads and everything else in the school or in the county. Then it shows the operations fund has increased. Rainy day fund, we've just let it pretty much sit there. And the WCC, I don't even know why this is part of it, but it's always been part of it, so I just keep it in there. But that just shows the balance of the Career Center. So that's a combination of all of the funds from us and from the other school districts that participate in it. So that's really the summary of the finances. So I don't know if there's any questions. If I have you just baffled because you have no idea, or if you're just like, wow, that was so simple, I'm glad it was explained so we all understood it.
Randy, you might explain to because we've talked about how we've spent our ESSER funds in the course of the time we've spent them, might be, if you could review a little bit where these ESSER funds have gone, how we have used them, so we don't have to take money from our operations, particularly our operations.
Well, I will start with the one, and I don't want to look at Daryl because we just have a running joke. When I first got here and Esser was really coming on board, I was told that if we had $250,000 to spend towards HVA systems, the heating, the cooling, if we had $250,000 to spend in the school district, we would never have to worry about our heating and cooling for a long, long time. That person no longer works with the school district. Daryl has somehow kicked that up to about, I think we're just short of $3 million that we spent. So I'm going to minute on Daryl.
Help the education fund come down.
But anyway, we've put in we've had major projects at Spartan Bowl, at Fayette Central, at Everton, a high school. We have done HVAC projects in every one of our buildings, including this one, and using ESSER funds. The project at Frazee, the building project, we got ahead of it a little bit. If you go to Frazee now, they have brand new furniture in the whole building. We were able to purchase that out of ESSER funds, so it saved it from coming out of the bond proceeds. We've also bought furniture in every single building. With those funds, we outfitted almost all new furniture at Fayette Central and Frazee. A little heads up, I don't think anybody realizes this because we're still working on it, but it was paid out of ESSER funds. Next month when you come to the board meeting, you may see all new furniture in here. Long story how we got there, but we needed to do that. But there were some odds and ends that we were cleaning up. So these tables, believe it or not, have been here about 15 years, we're guessing. And if you try to move them too much, you will find that they're loose and it was time. So we'll end up repurposing all of this, but we'll end up with new furniture here in the boardroom. Other things that we've done,
Didn't we fund our virtual school stuff or anything?
we've paid for technology and stuff for virtual. We've done some
we got one today,
repaving
yes.
projects that we've done. Altogether, we have spent $9 million over 5 years. That has significantly improved the school district, and it saved our traditional funds during that period of time.
What do we do with the old furniture if it's like still in decent condition?
If it's decent condition, we usually repurpose it around the school district because it's somewhere it's not in decent condition. And if it's in not decent condition, I view it that if it's not good enough for us to use, it needs to go in a trash dumpster. And if it's kind of in the middle there, we could have an auction. And we had an auction a couple of years ago now, I would think. But most of the time, by the time the furniture gets to that point, it's not worth the cost. We have auctioneers go, it's not worth my time to do that. And the last time we did an online auction, which also was better for them and better for us, really. And I think better for everybody. We had a good participation in it, did it that way.
Sasha, we do have a storage bin full of stuff too, that we keep in case somebody needs it.
The other thing, just to give you a heads up, and this was Jeremy and I've talked a little bit, I said, how far do I go, especially with the new board members? And with all of those fund balances and in the condition they're in, the one thing that you need to know, our buildings as a whole are old. They need major renovations, and people are going to look at what are you doing at Frazee and what are you doing at the high school. And just to let you know, the high school, the pool project, we're spending $6 million there, a little bit more, and essentially we're refurbing the pool. It's still going to be the same pool layout. We're going to have new plumbing, we're going to have new tile. It's going to look much better. It's going to have everything in there. The humidity is going to change, new heating and cooling in there. But we're not getting a new pool. I've heard that, what was it? We were going to host the Olympic trials or the state finals, or no, we are not. I happened to go in Carmel Pool, their newest natatorium when it was being built. It's crazy. But that $6 million is going into that. The Phrase Z is approximately $6 million also. The thing you need to know, and this is one, and we've already talked about when do we bring the new board members kind of up to date, but we did a review of all of our facilities conducted by Gibraltar Architects. They spent a year and a half going through all of our buildings and essentially rating that they would go, the plumbing in here needs to be replaced today. The plumbing in here, you're going to get another 10 years out of it. The heating and cooling is this. The structure is this. And they kind of set a standard in each building of, here's the base level of what you need to do to keep the building and maintain it. Here's improving the building a little bit, and here's the state of the art. Here's the fix the building, get everything taken care of, and get it looking nice and pretty and all of those kind of things. The project at Phrase Z and the high school were limited by how many dollars we could bond without going to a referendum and things. Even the Phrase Z project is actually below what they said was the base level. So it's going to look good, it's going to look a lot better, but it doesn't even meet the base level. And when I look at the other 7 buildings we have in the school district, to bring them all up, it's not going to be an easy task. One of the things that this board is going to need to attack, and need to attack very soon, is what are we going to do for a major building project. And the reason why I say that is the middle school did a renovation back in 2000. We are finally paying that bond off at the end of 2026. We cannot wait until September of 2026 to figure out what we're going to do with that. That project needs to start conceptually immediately to figure out what's going to happen. What are we going to do to our schools? How are we going to handle the tax rate? And that's going to be a major project. It's going to be some major decisions that you're going to have to make. And the way bonding works, can't even get into this. I can't even explain it all. If we decided we wanted to spend $30 million today, even though that bond doesn't come off until 2026, they would figure out a way that we could structure the bond today to do that. We wouldn't get as much money with it, it's a long story, but I'm saying that money, really, we could start looking to allocate what that is, and we need some presentations by Baker Tilly, Gibraltar, and it's going to be an education that's going to be important for the long-term building structures within our school district.
So to that point, Mr. Harris obviously has worked really hard on this, thank you, but there are 4 of us here at the table that are new to the conversation in terms of that facility study. We weren't here, you may have been watching online or what have you, but I would like to get Chris from Gibraltar in to just do a basic overview of what that study looked like. And I apologize for those of you that have heard it before, but I think it's important because Mr. Harris is right that we do have some big decisions to make in terms of facilities and what that looks like, right? And so because we do have those funds available, and not just for the purpose of taking on those funds, because we have needs, right? Obviously that we determined that or said that already. So big decisions coming, but we'll walk you through the process and make sure that our community is involved in that as well. Having good conversation with people about where we are and where we're going. So thank you, Mr. Harris. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Back to you, Ryan, I think. Let's see if I can get the screen.
I'm ready for a motion to adjourn the Board of Finance meeting.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Did you get both of those?
Was it Dustin?
Yeah, Dustin and Erica.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? That meeting is adjourned. And now we will start the,
This is Philip, sure.
call to order the regular business meeting of the board.
Kiddo got a lesson in patience tonight,
There's
didn't they? Yeah.
And we start with the presentation.
Hopefully you're ready to go.
Come on in. Come on in, guys.
Well, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to share the things that we're doing at Fayette Central. I'd like you to meet some of our Kiwanis Club. 3 years ago, Jeff Gabbard and I connected to create a service learning organization at Fayette Central. And tonight we want to share what we've been doing the last 3 years and what our future looks like. I'm first going to turn it over to Mr. Gabbard. He's going to keep it short because this is about the kids. Oh, sorry. And I also want to introduce our sponsors this year. We turned it over to our third grade team this year. It's Mrs. Boyd and Mrs. Johnson. And so they work with these kids about once every 2 weeks they meet. So, Mr. Gabbard.
Well, just very briefly, as I've been told, K-Kids was started in 2000 by the Kiwanis Club. And it's our way to get young people involved and get them involved with doing service for others. And that's really our goal, is to start them young, teach them what it's like to help other people and that good feeling that you get. And these guys are amazing. I don't take credit for any of them. The sponsors are the ones who really do the work. We're just the people who write the check and encourage them and do the things that they want done. But these guys are going to give you the good stuff. So I'm just here because I'm pretty. Is that good?
Very good.
We have a total of 15 kids on our K-Kids, so this is just a small group of who we have. They're only 4th and 5th graders, so they'll get to be with us for a couple more years. They had to fill out an application, so we went through all the applications, and they had to describe how they would be a role model in our building and how they would possess the fly expectations that we have at Fayette Central and the richer principles. So these are our students that really possessed all of those qualities, and we're able to demonstrate them for role models in our building. I'll go ahead and let Miss Mia begin, and they're going to go through all of our K-Kids expectations.
Motto: young leaders helping others.
Vision. We envision a world where all students have the opportunity to develop as caring, confident leaders who help others through service.
Mission. K-Kids is a global student-led organization that provides members with learning and experiences to build character, improve communities, and gain leadership skills through service.
Our objectives Objective is to develop student service and leadership skills, to provide opportunities for students to learn, engage, serve, and make to benefit their schools, community, and world, to foster caring, empathy, and good characters in students.
I would like to share what we have accomplished this year. Fundraiser to raise money for hurricane relief, decorated the Fayette Central float for the parade, shopping for and working the local food pantry, reading the morning announcements each day, selling ice cream during lunch on Fridays, hosting a family Fayette Central movie night, attending a Kiwanis meeting, hosting a luncheon for all emergency services, EMS, firemen, police officers.
Leadership, the ability to listen, communicate, serve, and guide others. Service, helping to improve the community and the world. Learning, building skills, and gaining knowledge.
Inclusiveness, accepting and welcoming differences in other people. Character, the ability to do the right thing, even when it's the unpopular opinion.
Pledge, as a K-Kid, I promise to serve others and make the world a better place for all.
Service, preparing young people to be service leaders today and for a lifetime is the purpose of Kiwanis Service Leadership Programs.
For the remainder of the years, we still have several plans. Shopping for and working another food pantry, working with Woodland Bible Church to clean up landscaping, to Penny Wars, Valentine's Day candygrams, build a free library at Fayette Central, celebrate teachers during Teacher Appreciation Week, and preparing to start recycling during the 2025 to 26 school year.
You guys are busy.
You also have homework.
Do you have questions for our K-Kids?
That's awesome.
How often do you meet?
We try to meet once every 2 weeks, so yeah, quite often.
Who came up with these projects? Did the kids come up with them, or were they basically suggested by somebody else?
A combination. We try to, if we come up with an idea, we just try to start off sharing it with them, and then they pretty much guide us into whatever the final outcome would be.
Did Mr. Gabbard feed you pizza when you went to the Kiwanis meeting? I went to a Kiwanis meeting too, so I got to eat the pizza.
A lot of it.
He did or you did?
I think
Plead the fifth.
Awesome. You guys are
Guys.
wonderful. Thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys, good job. Thank you guys. You're awesome. Thank you.
All right, that was wonderful. Now open the floor for patron comments on agenda items. See none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from the regular business meeting of 12/10/24. Personnel report, retirements, resignations, leave absence, etc. Approval of the December 2024 claims, number 69,673 to 699,23. Appointment of corporation treasurer and deputy treasurer. Financial expenditure goals, conflict of interest, donations. A donation of 5,000 pounds of steel estimated at $450 from CIT to WCC to be used in the welding technology program. A donation of $500 from Hoosier Feeder Company, Inc. to WCC to be used by the welding technology program for the outstanding student scholarship or tools.
Just for the good of the cause, for those of you that are new, the consent agenda obviously we do as a bundle, right? If there's ever anything that's in there that you can't vote on because of nepotism concerns, maybe there's something there with a family member or what have you, or just something that you want to pull out and vote on individually, you could let us know at that time. We can pull an item out, and we can make that an individual action item if needed. Otherwise, we vote on all of those things as a consent agenda together.
Jeremy, do you also want to go ahead and address the personnel report?
Yeah, one of the things that Mr. Harris and I talked about was, and maybe there's a reason why, we have part of the personnel report, retirements, resignations, leaves of absence as consent agenda, and a separate part as an action item. I'm just curious what the board feels about moving all of those personnel items as part of the consent agenda. I think it would certainly speed up action. And then again, we typically approve that personnel report as a bundle anyway, right? So if we had an individual of concern that somebody needed to pull out because of nepotism or other reasons, we have to do that anyway, right? So just curious the board's feelings on moving that, and again, this isn't something for a vote, this is just a procedural thing, if we want to do that. Mr. Harris, did I get that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so thoughts?
I think it's fine to bundle them together. I think that, the reason that they're part of the consent agenda typically has been, or at least one of them, is because it's resignations and
Sure.
folks may not be comfortable having that aired since it's a personnel thing. And that we've always had the other one because it's just about who's coming into the employ. But I don't have a problem with them being together and being a part of the consent agenda. I don't know,
Yeah. We'll do it as presented this evening because that's the way the agenda reads, but just curious for future if you guys are okay with that. So it's something Mr. Harris and I have talked about a couple of times. So yeah, so we'll leave it, like I said, as an action item for now, but then for next month, we'll make that switch and do that as part of the consent agenda.
All right, so that being said, motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Erica, second. All those in favor? Opposed? All right, action items, personnel report.
Okay. This is a sad occasion, it may be my last time to read this. So, on the personnel report, recommending for employment under certified staff, recommending Hunter Blake as a math teacher at the high school, Caleb Morgan as a science teacher at the middle school, Shelby Rader as a Title I preschool teacher at Little Spartan, Charlotte Still as the elementary teacher at Frazee, and Allison Venable as an elementary teacher at Fayette Central. Then under classified staff, recommending Brittany Allen as a bus driver, Tegan Glob as an educational assistant at Fayette Central, Daryl Hildebrand as a bus driver, Jessica Korf as a life skills special education assistant at Eastview, Marie Murray as a Title I education assistant at Fayette Central, Ryan O'Neill as a permanent substitute at Eastview, Nikki Flum as a bus aide, Dalton Rose as a mechanic up in transportation, Jay Rao as a bus driver, and Caden Wolf as a part-time custodian at Fayette Central. And finally, recommending under extracurricular, Robert Hendricks as the 7th grade girls softball coach.
And did we do the other action item first and then?
I would go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the personnel report
Okay,
as presented.
okay. Dustin and Sasha, second?
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed?
Awesome, thank you.
All right.
All right, guys. Hey, item B there is school board policy second reading and approval of those updated policies. You've had those in your hands for quite some time to review. I guess I would just ask, maybe if there are questions about those policies, anything of concern that we need to discuss. A250, no tobacco, B117 or 175, the functions of the board, C150, homeless students, enrollment rights and services, C300, programs for students with disabilities and their LRE, C550, student search and seizure, C575, student homework, D100, corporation organization, D200, standard of care and supervision of students, D250 is the teacher appreciation grant, and then G150, registered sex offenders, or excuse me, sex and violent offenders. So any discussion about those? Again, you've had them in your hands for quite some time. They've come for first reading before you in the month of December already. Please, Ann.
I had a question about the student search and seizure. It had to do, and I should have looked at it more closely, had to do with the vehicles in the parking lots and the lack of expectation of privacy in those because they were parked on school property. And we have a reasonably open campus. We have students that travel from the Career Center over to the high school, and that parking lot is right there. And I'm hoping that we have no issues with that, but it would seem to be, is there supervision involved with that? Once a student is in the high school building, are they ever allowed to go out to their vehicles? I'm not sure that I just wasn't sure that the language that was absolutely in that covered all those kinds of things, because those are just issues, unfortunately, that we have to deal with and want to make sure that we're covered, because it doesn't take a whole lot to have a really difficult situation.
It's a really good question. So some of those things would be covered under administrative guidelines or under your building level policies and procedures that would be outlined within your student handbook. And so some of those things, as far as whether students are or not allowed to go under certain conditions to their car, would be something that Mrs. Flum or team would put in their handbooks and make sure they're as well communicated with students.
We do have practice guidelines for that. So if a student does need to go out to their vehicle, if they forgot a phone book or a charger, they check with the office. Sometimes they're escorted out by the SRO. Sometimes a parent will call and say, I'm giving my child permission to go out, they forgot their phone. So a case-by-case situation, but they're always notifying the office, and we use our radios to let admin know student with this description will be going to the parking lot and returning.
So, yeah, thank you. Good question. Any other questions about those policies that we bring before you for second reading tonight? I know some of you have given me feedback, asked some questions along the way, and I do appreciate that. So thank you. Okay. Thanks for approval of that.
All right, so we need to make a motion to approve the second reading.
I'll make that.
I think two hands went up exactly the same time.
You made it, I'll say.
You'll second.
Okay.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have a new batch of policies here that we're bringing before you for first reading. Those in your packet start with A125, and those you've had in your hands here for a couple weeks, but we've made a few little tweaks to a couple of them, but nothing major. And again, these are just coming for first reading. We can make changes if we need to before next month, if you feel uncomfortable with those. We have first policy, A125, is a nepotism policy, essentially spelling out expectations for you as a board and for us to make sure that we're operating in a place of integrity in terms of the things that we do, and there's no favorable decisions that are made based upon someone's status as a family member or otherwise. The conflict of interest, that's part of the conflict of interest, gifts, and use of corporation resources. A325 is a policy in regard to communicable diseases. All of these medical policies have gone through the hands of Kelly Gettinger, a corporation nurse already, and so she has vetted them. This policy obviously speaks to communicable diseases and our response to those. Shall we have them within our school corporation? Obviously dealt with this a little bit recently with pertussis, right? So it's kind of fresh in our minds. C125 is admission for corporation in regard to legal settlement. This spells out the statutory requirements for acceptance of students, whether they be students who have transferred residences or just transfer students in general, but it spells out that process by which we take those students. Student Discipline C350 is a pretty blanket statement of we will establish a student code of conduct within our buildings that we'll bring before you in the form of our handbooks, and then after that we trust our people that are at the building levels to handle the student discipline as they feel appropriate within those boundaries and guidelines. C375 is suspension and expulsion of students. And again, this is required by Indiana law. It does define suspension and expulsion based upon the Indiana law and talks through those circumstances when students may be suspended or expelled from school, which is obviously never our goal. C400 is required policy as well as far as use of restraint and seclusion, obviously a last resort, but there are times for the safety of students or the safety of an adult where that does have to happen, and that just spells out that process of who can do that and in what circumstances. Medical needs at school, this one's a pretty robust policy. C525, there's a lot here. Dustin and I talked about a part of that policy today in regards to students who, or even adults who may have a medical do not resuscitate, and we're waiting on an answer on that one, so I'll get that back to you. But essentially the question was, this policy essentially says that if you have someone that has a DNR, essentially our school policy says that we still got to do it, right? But the question was, if somebody is licensed and decides not to, they could essentially lose their license, right? That was the question. And so we're waiting on some clarification on that. So again, first reading, we can make some changes before next time. But again, this is a very robust policy. There's a lot here. And so I don't want to go through every single detail, but you're welcome to read through that. It does talk to immunizations. It talks to mental health treatment, student concussions and cardiac arrest, all of these things being governed, of course, by the statute that we're given from the state of Indiana. D325, employee background checks and mandated reporting. Just talk through our processes that we have to have in place to make sure that our people that we're putting and trusting with our children have been vetted in the appropriate ways as required by law, which of course we do, and to make sure that we have the right people in front of our kids and entrust those people to do the work that they do. And then there is some mandated reporting, that some of that stuff changed in the last couple of legislative sessions in regards to what we're required to report. Shall we have an employee who crosses boundaries in any way in their life in terms of arrest? We have an obligation to report those things to the appropriate agencies because of licensure being pulled or what have you. So D475 talks about essentially the bad word in education, which is reduction in force, that RIF word that we don't like to talk about, but should we ever get to a point where we'd have to reduce force, reduce our teaching force especially, this governs that. It basically just says we're going to follow law when that happens. The administrative guideline that is associated with this essentially says that, says what state law says, which is if you would ever have to do that, you go based upon seniority is not in play. It's basically based upon the observations and evaluations of those teachers. So their evaluation rating is what you would go on. E175 is student records. Lots of laws there in regards to retention of records and such, and all that is spelled out there. F-125, there's a lot here, guys, and I'm so sorry. F-125 is purchasing procedures and capital assets, essentially goes through those statutory boundaries that we have to work within. If certain things, purchases fall within a certain range, we have a process that we have to follow. If we're doing capital projects and they fall within a certain range, there's a process to follow. And so all of that is spelled out here in this policy really well, I think, in F-125. It's a long one as well, but this is really Randy and I's Bible when we go to do big projects, right? We have to follow what we're given here to make sure we do it right as a public entity. And the last one is the one we talked about earlier, which is the investment income policy that has changed, or at least we're proposing to change. Again, nothing major in actual practice at all, just the verbiage is different and the way that it's laid out is a little bit different, but to Randy's point earlier, the policy essentially governs the same way. So the F-200 would be that new investment income policy. So I would welcome any feedback that you have before we bring those for second reading again in the month of February. We do have, I believe, remind me again, superintendent groups, who's part of that policy group? I think Sasha and Ann.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get the next batch, my plan is to call you guys right away to get you in the office so we have more of a communal process to that before we send it out to the rest of the board for feedback.
Just Cindy, I need them in paper, please.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. So any questions there? That's a lot. A lot.
All right, so I would like a motion to approve the first.
Yeah, we don't need a
We
motion
don't
to
need
approve
that
the
one?
first read. No, we just read them. That's all we
Okay.
need to do. No action
All right.
needed, so, yeah.
All right, good enough. Public comments. Persons wishing to make the board aware of suggestions, ideas, and/or comments may address the board at this time. Comments which involve personnel or students must be discussed in private. Do we have anything? Seeing nothing, we will move on. Superintendent's discussion, groups reports.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Principal director reports.
I would like to thank our custodial staff for getting our campus clear and spotless of the ice and snow. I know they put in a ton of hours over the last couple of weeks, and it shows that our students can safely navigate the courtyard, so we're thankful. And to our teachers for stepping up with e-learning. It's a learning curve for a lot of us, so appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I want to just add a little bit to that from Jeremy Wilson and the city workers that have the job they've done for us to help get us to school. Chris Gettinger and Angie Copeland down at the highway and highway workers who've made sure we've got to school as close to time as we can. They've been really helpful. And if we can, we need to remember Mark Beer in our prayers tonight.
For sure.
That's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
Director of Operations report.
You have some green paper with you, or also the copy, and you'll get used to this every month, but the funds report, I'll give a little bit more explanation than what I normally do. But generally speaking, you're going to see the fund balances from a year ago, and then the same balance for the current year at the end of the month. So you can see, are they going up, going down, those kind of things. If you're looking at this solely though as again from a home perspective, when you get generally towards the end of the report, you're going to see a lot of them with negatives, and you're going to go, why in the world do we have so many funds that have negative balances in it? Well, what it amounts to is we have been awarded grants and those kind of things from states and federal entities, such as special ed, Title I, those kind of things. We know what money we're going to get in for the year, but they don't send it to us until we claim it. So what you see is, really, we have sent a bill to the state saying, you owe us $240,000 because of what services we've provided. Then they send us a check for that. So the fact that we have billed them for it is a simple way of looking at it. That's why you see the negative number. So it's not a bad thing, but that kind of goes back into that cash flow and all of that kind of information. So
And those accounts are, you spend what you get, right? So it's not like there's fluff. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. So
yeah, we're awarded, and each year when they close out, Tina just has thrills and fun dealing with all the grant funds every month. So, but that's why you're going to see the negatives in there. So honestly, whenever I look at it, the first thing I'm always looking at is the top ones, the education fund, debt service operations fund, rainy day. Even the construction funds, they're going to just gradually dwindle out. So you're going to see them get lower. Right now we have the bond money in there, so they're going to get lower. The one I want to call your attention to this time, because it's coming up again, you're going to find there's some places where we like to hop on our soapbox, and this is mine. The second one listed there, the 0101.01, all school textbook. The state 2 years ago in their budget put a line item in the state of $160 million. And as if you are a parent, you may have heard the state go, we're taking care of textbooks. You no longer have to pay for those. Sounds great, sounds wonderful. They didn't fully fund it. So we receive a check of about $151 per kid, close. It actually, our average textbook, I think, is around $170 or $180. So you figure every student in the school district, we, out of our education fund, are paying $20 to $30 because the state took on this and said what a great job they're doing, but they didn't fund it. This is a budget year again in Indianapolis. You'll probably hear things from Leslie, but the proposal I saw, they're looking to increase the funding, but guess what? They didn't go, how much is this really costing schools so we can fund it? They just go, 20 more million, that sounds like a good number. Because when they came up with 160 million, I know through the business officials, they said, where did you get that number from? Did you poll the schools? Did you find out what they were spending? They go, nah, that just sounded about right. Literally, that was their answer. That sounds about right. Well, it wasn't about right, and it's still not about right. But that's about the way they work things, so that's why
even
it's
though they may give more money, of course, textbook fees go up every, the cost of a textbook goes up.
Cost computers, the
Inflation,
one,
yeah,
all that.
everything.
Yep.
And it doesn't, I don't know that I ever heard, so are parents responsible for chargers, for all the other things that go with?
If they damage something, no different than, yes, they can be charged for damages, but if it just wear and tear just goes out, no. But they can buy insurance through the school district. They can pay to take care of damage to devices.
Yeah, there are some, I'm sorry. Yeah,
That insurance policy is, you can get it when the kid is in first grade, and it follows them all the way through high school. And the amount that you pay you pay a little bit more initially, and the premium does not go up appreciably at all. And it's really very, very, very inexpensive for what you get, and a lot of parents take advantage of it. And that equipment just gets used so much. There's a lot of wear and tear on it. So most parents say, I think it's $40 a year or something like that. So they do that rather than, well, the cost of replacement of this is a lot more money.
Sure. And there's some gray there in terms of like there are allowable fees that you can charge for still. We as a corporation have taken the stance that we want education to be free for all, essentially. There are places, though, if you go to the Career Center and you want to buy, your cosmetology packet, right, that you're going to take with you at the end of the road, like that's different, right? We will still provide you with that stuff to be able to be a cosmetology student without you paying, but you don't get to take it home with you, right? So there are still places where that does occur, but for the most part, our kids come to school, they can essentially come to school and not pay a penny for those things. So, sorry.
I have.
All right, Assistant Superintendent's report.
Okay, I passed out a packet to you. It looks larger than what it's actually not going to take me that long, but I wanted to make sure that you had the data in a couple different formats. The previous board had asked that maybe we share more academic data in terms of some of the initiatives that we were funding through ESSER funds. So this is an attempt to kind of keep you guys more in the know of that. So this is just our winter NWEA data. And I think it's important to know that NWEA is just one piece of data that we use for student achievement and growth. Our principals and our teachers are using a number of different data points to determine instruction and remediation. So this is just one piece that I'm going to share with you tonight, but I think it's a good way for you guys to get an idea of where we stand in terms of NWEA for the winter. So the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between norm reference and criterion reference. A norm reference test just means that we're comparing student scores to other students. An NWA is a norm reference test. Criterion reference test, which you probably are familiar with mostly, is iLearn. That's where you are comparing a student to a defined set of skills or knowledge. They absolutely have proficiency in this standard, they're approaching this standard, or they have exceeded this standard. So there's a difference between this test data and what iLearn data gives us. So this is a norm reference test, so what we're doing is essentially we are comparing our students' performance with a national norm, which we call a RIT score. And all of you parents have probably heard this either in a teacher conference or you have received a letter where it talks about the RIT scores. So the first two data points that we look at in terms of achievement are how are our kids achieving in terms of that national norm. So if you look at the first data graph, this is our math, because we test in math and reading. So if you look at our math, the red line is the national norm. So that's where the average of all of the kids who took this test at that grade level scored. And then the line below it is where we as Fayette County are stacking up in terms of that number. If you flip the page behind, you have the actual numbers because they are so close, they are on top of each other. So that's why it's a little bit thicker of a packet, because I wanted you to be able to see how close we are in comparison to the national norm with the majority of our grade levels in math. This is our fall data, so we take this 3 times a year. So in fall, you can see that we're pretty close to that line. We have a couple grade levels that are a little bit below that line, but most of them are coming in pretty close to that national norm. The second one, which is, you have to skip a page because I gave you the data chart too, is reading. You can see that we fall a little bit lower in reading. We are pretty aware of that, and we've had those discussions with the board. This is where we feel like we've had the most COVID loss. A lot of our younger students didn't get some solid foundational reading skills when we were doing the online learning or when we just didn't go for a semester. So we're trying to recover that, and we feel like we're recovering that learning loss faster in math than we are in reading. There's many factors to that, but COVID is definitely one, is that loss of foundational skills. You can see as we go into the winter that we'll start to catch up in some of the grade levels, but almost all of our grade levels in the fall were right below that national norm. Then you go to the next graph, and that is our winter norm. So we take it again, but we took it right, we just finished it. So you can see in the math, we are again right on that line with those national norms. And again, this is a snapshot of a student's performance in a specific time frame. So math, again, we're slightly, but we even have kindergarten, 1st and 6th are slightly above that national norm, but most all of the grade levels are in that national norm range. Then again, we go to reading. You can see that we are making some gains in terms of reading, but we still have those 1st and 2nd graders who continue to struggle in comparing to that national norm, excuse me. But some of our other grade levels, especially kindergarten, we have noticed kindergarten across the board in both math and reading have performed very well, so that gives us a lot of hope. The other way you can look at NWA is growth. And this is the piece that I think most of our teachers and our administrators really use in terms of driving instruction and intervention, because if you're at the bar, whether you're at the bar, we want you either top to excel and we want the bottom to excel. So that mean norm is like 50th percentile. That's dead average on a bell curve. So you have some kids who are going to be above that, you're going to have some kids that are below that. But throughout your year of instruction, all kids should grow on that stair step, depending on what instruction they receive. So the way this is you can see that the diamond is the projected growth. So what NWA does is, just like it gives you a RIT score, it'll tell a parent or a student what their projected score is for the next testing session based on their current performance. It also tells us as a district, this is what you are projected to grow as a district. So the diamonds is the last testing session. The blue bars are our observed growth from fall to winter. So you can see in math, all of our grade levels made their observed growth. Essentially, you want your diamonds in the box. If all of your diamonds are in the box, the things that you're putting in place are working and kids are showing adequate growth for their projected growth scores.
So the diamond is where we should be, the blue tells us where we were, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? That's projected
Yes.
number is the
Yeah,
diamond?
the diamond is the grade level norm, like where we should be.
Okay, great.
And the blue is where we ended up. So again, you want your diamonds in the box, and the lower they are, the more they exceeded that growth target.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so that we have lots to be celebrating there, because all of our grade levels are inside, their diamond is inside of their box in math. And that's from a lot of the work that our administrators and teachers are doing with EES, with the common formative assessments, with their PLCs. So I really wanted to show you that because I think this gives you a good indication that students in Fayette County in math are growing.
In growing more so than the norm is growing.
Yeah.
The thousands of kids that take this test nationwide, our kids grew more in that time period than the majority. Make sense? Good stuff.
Okay, and then in reading, you can see again, those diamonds were where we were, and the blue is our observed growth. You can see that we have kindergarten who made more than their observed growth, and they're doing really well. We have a couple of grade levels that are starting to come back up. Third grade and fourth grade are starting to come back up, and even fifth grade. But again, what we look at as administrators and as a district, okay, we obviously have to do some more work at first and second grade to recover some of that loss because our kids are not growing at the rate they need to be growing. So it gives us a lot of information in terms of how we implement new initiatives, how we look at curricular resources, the things that we're doing in the classroom. So that's why I wanted to show you this chart. It's a quick glance at saying, okay, we need to look at our primary reading and figure out what our kids are missing and what things they need more additional resources around.
Our fifth and sixth graders whose diamonds are outside the box.
Exactly.
Those kids
They're
were
COVID
first and
kids.
second,
Yeah.
They were at that, and so is that what, is the assumption that contributed?
A little bit. COVID is not the reason that all kids are not on target. A lot of it is just kids don't read books like they used to. Kids are very device oriented. It takes a lot of time when you get into that upper level NWA RIT bands. It's a lot of comparing of text. It's the same thing with iLearn. It's a lot of higher level thinking skills, which require a lot of stamina, and our kids are in that instant gratification and they want the answer quick. And if they can't get it, a lot of times this doesn't mean that they necessarily don't know it. They don't have the patience to figure it out. So I think it's a combination of both. There are definitely some COVID learning loss for those kids because they were part of that COVID quarantine period. And those are things that we have to dig in deeper too as well. Because
Yeah,
this is just our data right off the bat.
If I can say this is only growth, right? So that's all this is, and it's growth from fall, beginning of school year, to winter, middle of school year. So that's the window of time that you're seeing there. So even though, like, we could look at math and say all of the growth is amazing, these kids could still be below grade level, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, so the growth piece is really what it's all about, and so we still have some work to do here as far as reading and language arts for sure. I just want to make sure that that was clear.
Well, then do you make assumptions about what's happening between the fall and the winter testing cycle?
Sure. I mean, we look at all of it. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's one snapshot of a kid's achievement. A lot of times administrators will meet with teachers and they'll say, okay, tell me about this kiddo. Is it he or she a poor test taker? Did she rush through it, or did they have a bad day? There's a lot of things that factor into this, so that's why you have to triangulate your data. You can only use it as a snapshot in time, but at a quick glance from a district perspective, it allows us to really focus in on those grade levels that might need more support after that testing session.
And just to give you more info about what Mrs. Casaro does, because she's been deep into this data for weeks now. Like, she's Rain Man when it comes to this stuff, but she has spreadsheets that show each teacher, the percentage of their kids that met their RIT growth. Like, it goes pretty deep into that data to say, like, where are we? And there are teachers that like 90% of their kids met their RIT growth. So like, what did that teacher do really, really well, right? And be able to learn from that person and be able to share that information. So this is very high level district data, if that makes sense. But just know that we're having conversations, the principals will tell you, all the way down to the building level, and then from the building level to the teacher level, from the teacher level to the student level, in terms of where we are and where we're going.
Okay. The next one, I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what are some of the things that we have in place to support kids in terms of intervention and student supports. So those of you that were on the board last year know that we added 2 interventionists at our 2 highest socioeconomic schools, and they're working to provide direct skill instruction for specific groups of kids who are identified as needing more support. We are also doing teacher coaching around the instructional priorities model, which is EES. All of you have heard EES if you've been on the board. And then our principals are really doing a great job of providing professional learning communities where they're sitting down and having those conversations about, okay, this is our first grade. Why do you think we're doing this? And this teacher's doing really well. What is he or she doing that we can share with the other teachers and so forth? So it's those conversations that during those PLCs that really have a strong impact on student achievement. So I want to make sure that they get recognized for that. We have daily targeted interventions. Sometimes they call it win time, or they'll call it intervention time, where we are providing tier 2 supports, which is an additional support outside of your core instruction for all kids. Something that we did just for one school is Vimy Math. Grandview has, they decided to help us out and take on Vimy Math like 2 weeks before, maybe within 2 weeks.
No,
2 days?
The day before the teachers walked in the building.
Yeah, so kudos to them. And I'm going to show you a little bit of their data to show you how we use those to look at the effectiveness of something. We also do a lot of diagnostic screening and formative assessments. We have core assessments, we have CFAs. We also participated in the iLearn checkpoints. A CFA is a common formative assessment. So you teach a unit and there may be 3 priority standards within that unit. And then everybody in that grade level gives a common assessment to make sure that all kids are getting that guaranteed viable curriculum. And then we can say, okay, yeah, they've mastered this. And then we also come back with the iLearn checkpoints as a summative. Because so they'll take a CFA over a standard, and then they'll take an iLearn checkpoint over the standard, and then in the end of this year, they'll take the actual iLearn summative assessment.
Does that make sense, the common formative assessment piece? I mean, we've all, like I have my own kids, and I know that I don't mean this to sound disrespectful at all, but an A in one person's class may not mean the same thing as an A in another person's class, right? And so
kind of levels the playing
absolutely
field.
and gives us that picture of where we are. It's what a standardized test does, right? And so that's essentially what we're doing on our own level, but on a more regular basis to make sure we keep a pulse of where those kids are.
Okay, and then again, we are always looking at our current resources in terms of the things that we adopt in terms of curriculum. Do we need to add additional resources? And we've in the last couple of years in literacy, we have taken on Hegarty and Foundations, which is a very intense phonics-based type of instruction to help support maybe some of those kiddos that are missing some of those foundational reading skills. And then supports beyond the school day, we still continue to offer summer school for our elementary kiddos. We have after-school clubs and remediation going in all of our buildings, and then all of our buildings through Title I have family literacy and math nights where we try to help parents encourage the love of reading, maybe give them strategies on help their kids with reading and math. So those are just a few of the things that I wanted to show you that we're doing and kind of tie those together. Because a lot of times I bring you things in like different chunks and it's hard to kind of all piece them together. So this is kind of piecing them all together for you. Back to Vimy Math, I want to give a shout out to Grandview. You can see in the fall, this was the percentage of students that were at their grade level RIT, and then the percentage of students that were at their grade level RIT in winter. So from August to December, after doing Vimy Math, you can see the large increase of numbers of students that were not performing with their peers that have now are performing with their peers. So they're not only showing, and we have some teachers in that building that have 80 to 90% of their students showing growth from fall to winter in the area of mathematics. Vimy Math is an Indiana-based curriculum. It is created by teachers for teachers. It's very rigorous. It has like a spiral review. And I know McCann will say the same thing. It creates a very positive culture for math, and I think the teachers are excited and the students are excited. And McCann, I don't know if you want to share your weekly.
We do. We recognize students every Friday. There's a Thursday test every Thursday. We recognize, and it's a big hype. We have posters all over the building. When you come to do your building tours, you'll be able to see the Vimy boards that are out. We do a top growing class, so it doesn't matter if you were, if your students are at 60% and then they're at 70%, those percentages don't sound very big, but we recognize growth. And then we do biggest movers, and we call kids names, and they come down, they get a shirt, and like they say hashtag top 10 mover on the back. They wear them for the week. We gather them back up, we wash them, and every Friday they go back out. You'll see kids wearing them all through the week. They stay at school. We do a top growing classroom, top achieving classroom. We do, like you can hear the whole building. Mrs. Casaro was there for announcements, and when we do the highest growers, you'll hear, we tell the kids to stand on their chairs. And so they stand on their chairs, and you can hear the whole building erupt in applause for those kids. It's super cool. The culture that it creates around math, when we came back from snow days, the kids were like, we're not testing this week? There's no announcements this week? Like, they were ticked off that we weren't doing what we wanted to do. That's right. Kids were excited about math. Mrs. Casaro was there. I have to tell a story. I have a second grade little girl. We have a class in fourth grade, and Mr. Crow is killing it, and he's always getting the top growing class, and her class finally knocked him off the pedestal, and she came down to me, she goes, did you see we beat Mr. Crow? Like,
she was so happy.
So excited. It just creates that kind of culture around math.
And I'm looking at Vimy. Vimy puts out leaderboards every week too on their Facebook feed. And so I looked at last week, and the first place, the two first place classrooms in the entire Vimy network were Crow and Garrett from Grandview.
Yeah, we make the top boards all the time.
Yeah,
they post them. First time it came out, I shared it with teachers, and then there's a group message that my teachers have that I'm not a part of. My secretary goes, have you seen this? Now they started sharing them with each other and congratulating one another, which also is very cool. So it has nothing to do with me. My teachers are rooting each other on when those boards come out. It's very cool.
It's also on the thing in front of the school.
Yeah, the placard.
The moving sign in front of the school, you can go by every day and see who, these are your students, and the parents that see these is like, that's my kid, and it's for the world to see on beautiful Grand Avenue, so.
Kudos to Mrs. McCann and her team. I mean, they, when I said something to Mrs. Casaro about it, she was like, let's do it. And I was like, really? She goes, I have just the right person. And I was like, okay. And now it's obviously it's yielded results, right? Which is what we're all after. And if we can focus on that, I just love the fact that Mrs. McCann focuses so much on that growth piece. I mean, the reality of it is, if we focus on growth, achievement will come. Right? And so that's really where it's at. And you look at these numbers, and 88% of kids, these are by grade level, I assume?
Yes, I should have put
No, it's okay. So 88% of kids met their RIT growth. That's incredible.
That's sixth grade. And that's sixth grade.
So, I'm blown away by
So is
those
that going to be
results.
shared with everybody?
Yeah, our goal is, obviously, we want to continue to look at all of the other data pieces that we're getting from Grandview and this pilot. And then, if we continue to see the success and the culture continues to grow, that it would be something that we'll probably bring back to you guys for adoption in the future. But, it's like anything, when you try something new, you want to try it in small doses and make sure it's something that's really going to work for you before you invest the financial backing of it. But so far, like I said, this is just from August to December. It's a very short period of time, but and we had other teachers across the district that had significant growth, but the consistency of this growth in the building stands out a little bit more based on the resources that they're using. So as long as those resources continue to provide these types of data points, and we feel like it's a good thing for our kiddos, then it would be definitely something that we would share with all of our elementaries.
And then hopefully, when we get to iLearn in the
Yeah,
spring.
we see that carry over.
We see the effect that this has had on our iLearn scores.
Yes.
And can evaluate, given that information, on what's working, what's not working, what we need to tweak, what we don't need to tweak. So,
And I tried to use the iLearn checkpoints, but we've only given one, and it was like in the first month of school, and they had very little instruction with ME math, so I can't even compare that. I'm all about comparing all kinds of data points. I just don't have a lot right now. So this is just a lot of information very quickly for you, but it's just a way for us to kind of show you the great things that are happening in our classrooms. And if you have any questions, or if you get home and you have additional questions, feel free to ask Jeremy or myself, and we can expand on those.
Did you say very quickly?
I know I'm never prepared. I get very passionate about my data and my curriculum, and so they usually give me a hard time.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent report.
I will be quick. Just really quickly, just give you a couple updates. I want to second what Daryl said and thank him as well. So weather decisions are never easy, and I want you guys to hear that. I will always make decisions that as if my child were on our toughest route, on our toughest roads. That's the decision we'll make. What made this last week a little more difficult was because the city was in good shape, right? County roads just were blowing, were difficult to clear. Daryl and I, because of his driving, we found out the hard way that our roads were.
I warned you.
He said, let's go down roads and see how they are.
And so he took us down some of the worst.
And you got stuck.
And we closed school.
Yeah.
So all the kids are going to be moving all the snow to the road.
So we have a calendar right now that doesn't have any snow makeup days. So we've exhausted the 3 allowable asynchronous days from the state. Asynchronous essentially means no live instruction, right? So if we had the ability to do synchronous instruction, which would be 50% of our school day on a computer with kids with live instruction, those are unlimited, right? But because the asynchronous days are limited to 3 by the state, I've seen some stuff the state's put out about some possible waivers and allowing more of those asynchronous days. I'm looking into that as we speak, because I'm guessing that we're going to have some more days that are coming, because it sounds like we're going to have a couple other significant snow events in the month of January. But just want to give a big shout out to everybody, the whole team, all of them. It's hard work, and it's hard work because it's early, it's late, it's all hours of the night and day, but also it's the responsibility of the safety of the people that we are entrusted to keep safe. And those decisions are hard. I trust Daryl with the lives of those and helping me make those decisions. So just want to say thank you for what
You
you
have
do.
3 schools waiting on you to decide what you're doing for tomorrow.
I have literally had my phone blowing up this entire meeting from other, and know this, like superintendents, I have a superintendent group, and we're constantly communicating.
Well, because we
Yeah.
also have the Career Center, so we have 5
do.
sending schools, and so we
We
do have to
do.
coordinate with those schools too, to
Yeah.
some extent.
So we do the best we can to make those decisions early. Obviously, tomorrow morning is going to be cold. We're looking at 0 to 2 degrees in real temperature. The good thing is the wind chill is going to be about the same. And so I think a 3 mile an hour per wind tomorrow, so that wind chill is going to be about the same. So not quite cold enough to have to delay or cancel based upon temperature. You get down to -10, -15, and you get in those windshield charts and you start looking at those, that's when you get to be danger zone for kids. So we're not there. The only issue with that cold is that the buses could potentially, if you get cold enough, we might have trouble with some buses actually starting, right, which could cause us some trouble. The delay yesterday was just based upon some drifting roads in our county, right? And huge thanks to the county as well. Even tonight, Daryl and I were talking, and the county's going to be out early for us tomorrow and flex their time to make sure that they're out working, starting at 5 a.m.?
5:30 or
5:30, yeah, to try to get those roads, make sure the county roads are good. So, so we have some decisions to make, it sounds like, here in the next couple hours in the morning. Always try to make them early for families as much as we can, but also weather changes and conditions change, and so.
One of the things we do get a lot out of is they'll say, well, let's go on a 2-hour delay. If you watch your 2-hour delay temperature at 7 versus 9 o'clock it will be colder because the sun's coming up and everything's, so it's always colder. And it's like, well, do we go 2-hour delay and go colder? So it does happen a lot.
Yeah. Any questions there at all? Good there. I think communication was good, just trying to keep people informed and do the best we can with that. So do want to give a quick report on graduation rate. So that was released publicly, I think a week and a half probably ago. We met today with our local newspaper, the News Examiner, to talk that through a little bit. Very misleading, and I think I sent some stuff to you guys in my last week's letter, but essentially our real graduation rate, the number of kids that walked across the stage last year with a diploma, a real diploma, that worked really, really hard to get to that finish line, was 95-point-something%, am I right? 95.58. Kelly knows it exactly. The state of Indiana this last year made some changes, right? One of those changes being they put waiver caps in place. Waiver caps are essentially cap the number of kids that can get a waiver to graduate. What a waiver really means is that they didn't meet one of the 3 buckets for whatever reason to graduate. The one most of those kids that we had waivers for that didn't meet was bucket 3, essentially, which is what is it called? Employability. What's the name of the bucket?
Post-secondary readiness.
Post-secondary readiness. Thank you. In the past, many kids who didn't take a dual credit pathway, and Kelly, if you want to explain this, you can. You probably do a better job than I. You want to go ahead and talk about that?
So box 3 potentially is a couple different options to be able to check off to say that we met that guideline through the state. So one of the options is for students to score what they need to score on the SATs, high enough to meet within the state standard realm. A lot of our students don't do that. We have the option of taking dual credit classes, which through our early college high school, and getting a C or above. So not only passing, but a C or above. Another option to check that box is to go to the Career Center and to get a C or above in those courses as well. So a student may go to the Career Center and get a D and still get their certification, but they're not able to check that box. In the past, we could use ASVAB, which is the military test. When the state in 2023 changed the requirements, that was no longer an option unless a student was going to enlist in the military. So that was kind of a safety net for certain kids who couldn't pass the dual credits, who couldn't, go to the Career Center, or who didn't get into the Career Center or pass the SATs. They also put a percentage of the amount of waivers that you could use. So 9% from that 2024 cohort of your students who were part of that cohort, which is usually around, at that point, I think it was like maybe 20-some kids that you could use a waiver for. And then they've lowered it each consecutive year. So this coming year, only 6% of your cohort can receive a waiver. So the students that walked across the stage, that 95.58%, are students that met the amount of credits they needed to receive that high school diploma. That diploma would carry on to them into the community to get a job, the same as a student who checked box 3. Same diploma from the state, just a different computation within the graduation rate formula.
It's very good. Thank you.
And do we know, is the legislature tackling that? Do you know, Randy, or, I mean, I know you keep track of legislature, or do you know?
What specific?
We're tackling it as
A
school.
corporation instead.
We're providing more opportunities to catch those students that are unable to meet those boxes.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know if the
providing
new graduation pathways correct any of that.
Yeah, so for those kids that are not getting the diploma seal, they still have to complete a pathway essentially to qualify.
Right.
So here at Fayette County, we currently have 3 pathways that we offer. We in Mrs. Flump's war room, if you will, I was in there today, where they have just worked tirelessly this week to figure out the path forward to fix the problem. They've got mapped out, I don't know, 13, 14 different potential pathways. Mrs. Giesing's part of that too. To give kids more opportunities to complete bucket 3, if that makes sense, in terms of that deficiency that we've seen. And so we do have a path forward. We're right now working, really, they're working very hard on identifying those kids in the class of 2025 who still may be deficient there. That 9% waiver cap that we saw in last year's graduating class has now moved to 6%, and then next year we'll move to 3%. And so the state is essentially saying, we don't want you using waivers. That's not an option, right? And so we have to find ways to get kids that bucket. And one of the things I keep saying, and they'll tell you this too, that I want to make sure that we're not just checking boxes to check boxes, right? We're creating systems that are in the best interest of kids, that help blur the lines between what we do in K-12 education and their future, right? So how do we do that and do that well? And so one of the ways you can check bucket 3 is credentialing, right? So how do we build systems to help kids get credentialed so they can go into the field and have an HVAC credential to use and get a job when they're done with high school? Those types of systems are really what we're trying to build to help kids be successful, and it will help us this way too. But yeah, I think the disappointment for me is the fact that the hard work of the amazing people at Connersville High School isn't necessarily reflected in that 70% number, and the hard work of those kids who worked so hard to get to the finish line isn't reflected in that number. And that's why I want to make sure that folks know exactly that is an adjusted graduation rate based upon some systems that we need to fix, right? And we can do that, so.
So I would just also, in addition to the waiver cap, there's also what's called the alternate diploma cap. So you're only allowed a certain amount. In the past, it was a certificate of completion, and now it's an alternate diploma. So our life skills students, you have to have a certain percentage cap in the state before you're deemed for that. That's a no-brainer. Those students deserve that alternate diploma, and we'll work with them to receive that. But the plan is to create more pathways that are dual credit, still protecting our early college high school, but creating other pathways for that 30% or so of students that need the skills, they need the additional principles classes based on their interest. So that's the path we're going forward.
Do we, is there any funding attached to the graduation rate? Or complexity index or anything?
That's a good question. I have to dig into that a little bit.
No, you don't think so?
I'm not attached to the rate, but I think the pathways that we create bring in more funding.
CTE funding.
Yeah, so the more pathways we create, the more funding we bring in.
Yeah,
But we don't get deemed other than public perception or
not to my knowledge.
optics?
Yeah. Any other questions about that at all? Thank you, Mrs. Fong. Thank you so much. And thanks for your hard work. I know you've worked really hard on it this week, and we'll continue to work hard moving forward. Did want to say we have our Professional Learning Day on the 20th. School will not be in session for our students. Mrs. Corsaro and some others have been working really, really hard to put together a Professional Learning Day that day. I think we have, how many breakout sessions do we have scheduled? A lot. A lot. So anything from self-defense to student loan forgiveness to literacy strategies to, I mean, it's a plethora of different things that we're putting out there in front of our teachers and opportunities.
Reading, where are we? Aren't all of our teachers doing that however many hour?
The literacy
Yes,
endorsement.
the literacy endorsement,
We
and
have
I know Ms. Phillips gave us a report on some of her staff last summer doing
We have
some
a
of
lot
that.
of them that are in the process or have completed it.
Okay, good.
And there is some proposed legislation to
That's kind
move
of
those, the
stalling.
number of hours of professional development down from 80 to, I believe, 40, I believe is what I've seen.
Either that or
And
more
so
money.
there's some
They
discussion,
needed- they
yeah.
weren't getting much money for that.
There's some discussion about
It's
that.
expensive, and teachers are not necessarily that well paid.
Yeah, and there was talk, and I hate to say this, about doing something similar with numeracy. And, my message to Senator Rotz and the people that were making that call was pump the brakes. Like it's not that it's not needed. Let's give our people a chance to catch their breath. When the literacy piece came out, it was very quick and came at us with not a lot of time and not a lot of explanation either. And so it was a difficult pill to swallow when it came at us. So yeah, so we'll see what happens there. But kudos to our people that have gotten that work done. They've done a really nice job in this Sarah and her leadership. So appreciate that so much. So Frazee is coming along. I was there today, a little behind on phase 1. I'm being told it won't necessarily adversely affect the entire end date of the project. They'll catch up this summer, essentially, and have phases that kind of overlap to catch up. The stall was essentially based upon some design back and forth on the HVAC units that they're putting in our classrooms. Now that they have that figured out, then they'll just replicate that, obviously, for each of the phases in the classrooms that'll be in each phase. But when we get a little further along in the project, I'd love to take you over and have you take a look at the work that's happening there in terms of those classrooms. Working right now, we're going to bring before you in the month of February, we're going to have a 1028 hearing, which essentially means that, like Mr. Harris said earlier, these projects were really built upon the amount of money that you had available, not necessarily all the needs, right? So when we got bids back, those bids came back a little bit higher than what we wanted, which means that we had to cut some things. What that means, we didn't take on alternate bids. We essentially just did the base bid. One of those alternates that we took out was a lot of the casework in classrooms. So we had a meeting with the teachers at Frazee. One of the things we heard from them loud and clear was like, we gotta have a place to put our staff, which is completely understandable, right? If you've been in the classroom, you've been a teacher for a while, you know, like you just accumulate stuff that you need, right? That you need to do your job. And so we're in the process right now of getting some quotes to make sure that we can put some casework in those classrooms. But that does also mean that project max dollar amount is going to be more than what we originally had put before you for approval and what our public believes to be the project cost, which means we have to ask permission essentially to spend more money, right? So that's what we're going to do in the month of February to bring before you to say, hey, we need more money for the project to put this casework in classrooms. Anything else to add with that, Mr. Harris?
Painting in the corridors.
A little bit of painting.
Probably in the office.
Yeah.
Will that be where some of that interest income can be beneficial? Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the operations fund. It'll be a combination.
Yeah, so that cash that we have that we've talked about, yeah, and some of those things can be used for that purpose. So, okay. I think, oh yeah, I did, I think, Leslie, I think you're the one that asked for this, but asked for a report, annual report for our solar panels and the
Yes, I
functionality.
did.
That just
Yes.
came through at the 11th hour before
Okay.
the meeting. So I will send that to you guys
Okay.
and we'll digest that at the February meeting. So
Thank you.
we've got some questions about it anyway. I just took a quick look, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have anything for the good of the cause?
I have a question. Did we resolve who was going to sit on the TIF board on the redevelopment?
Oh gosh, good question.
And last time we did this, we just asked at a meeting, and I know we had several people that expressed interest.
I don't know that we ever came to restitution on that as far as who that would
Right,
be.
and Dustin's not on a board elected position, and you did ask, didn't you say you would
Yes,
serve
I
on the
would.
redevelopment commission?
Good.
So, if you remember, well, I don't know, will you let Mayor know?
I can,
Mayor
yeah, I'll
Frank
talk
Well,
know?
as a city employee too, that would be an area of kind of your expertise also. Because you're dealing with the same entity every day at work.
Right, and that's kind of a unique, I mean, I don't pretend to know a ton about TIF, but I did do some research and readings to try to figure out, and school needs to have a representative, we just don't have a voting representative, but we look forward. So yeah, I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. So
And I did want to reiterate Daryl's point. We are all just sending our prayers and our thoughts and our heartfelt feelings to Mark Beard. We're just, yeah.
Some things just don't make sense.
Yeah.
Anything else for the good of cause? All right. Motion we've all been waiting for.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll so move. Make a motion to adjourn. Let's reassign that.
And I will second it. Never have to do that.
All those in favor? All opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Brian.